Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McLernan, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion. You can comment on the live stream, and we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome to Between the Before and After. I don't think there's ever an episode where I'm not excited about the guest that I have on, but Patrice is near and dear to my heart because of her keen interest in trauma. She is a very special, colorful, passionate lady who speaks with, all kinds of expertise. She's driven by her motto, be inspired to be yourself and be inspired to empower someone else. I love that. So she wears many hats. I think in her language, you said a chicken many hats.
I'm a chicken many hats.
there you go. A teacher, you've been a community licensed mental health therapist. Overall, the goal of what you're trying to do here is to help others heal from the pain of their past traumas and walk into a healthy and whole future. I think that's a big mission that you're on.
Well, first, let me say thank you for having me on.
Oh, yeah. I just kind of lobbed that in your general direction. That's a big mission that you're on. Yeah. Welcome to the show.
So let's talk about this a little bit. Here's what I've discovered. I've discovered that everybody in this life has experienced some type of trauma. You really get it from the beginning once you get here. First thing the doctor does is smack you on the tail. You know when to enter the world, get in trauma, get deep before you get started. But what I find interesting is that it's not about the trauma, it's about you overcoming the trauma. Okay. So I want to really talk about what it means to have that story, have that trauma, that turning point, and then move it into your victory. So moving from that victim to victory.
I love that. So to get us warmed up here, actually, I'm going to ask you a random question because I always like to do this with my guests. I have 150 random questions here, so we don't know what we're going to get. But if you choose number between 1 and 6, that's going to tell me what the topic's going to be. So What's number between 1 and 6?
Let's do 3. I'll go straight in the middle with that one. Let's do 3.
3. Okay. So what are some formidable moments that occurred to you this year? The topic being self. What are some formidable moments that occurred to you this year?
Ooh, this year's been a lot.
Yeah.
This has been a year of continue with pushing forward, learning how to love myself deeper, and then also being able to say, I'm okay with not being okay sometimes, which is not an easy thing. Many times in this world, we're so good with, I'm good, I'm fine, everything is wonderful. But are you okay with telling other people, no, I'm not good right now. I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, that's really powerful. This ability to be okay with not being okay. I absolutely love that. You also said learning to love yourself deeper, because this is something I think you've already been on this powerful journey. But what does that look like for someone maybe who has already been on this journey of self-love? You've already come a long way. How do you do that?
When I talk about loving yourself deeper, that means falling in love with who you are now. Many times we fight to get past those skeletons of our past, but now you're saying, this woman has made it. This man has made it. And I love them even more. And matter of fact, let's go a little step deeper. I even love who they're becoming now in their next phase, their next stage. And that's what I talk about when I say going deeper. Finding out that, you know what, a couple of years ago, maybe I would fall for that. I might have been a little gullible, but now I'm not. I'm standing strong and I'm doing my thing and I'm going to do it well. So that's what means going in a deeper love for self.
I love that. And you bring such like a warm energy to this. And so if we think about it, like what is your story? Because that's part of what we want to talk about is how do you get to this place? So if we go all the way back, because you experienced some childhood trauma, like what was that for you?
So for me, there were a couple different childhood traumas. The first thing is I grew up in a home witnessing domestic violence with my mother and my father. I thought this was normal. In my household, at any point, you could come home and you could see glass flying. You could hear my mother screaming. I've literally watched my mother be have her brake lines cut in the house. I've seen her be actually strapped into a car and couldn't get out. There had been moments where this went on for years, and it just kept going, kept going. But the night that really grips me the most is when I was 6 years old. And I remember this night because I had on one of my favorite things. I had on my strawberry shortcake pajamas. Okay. I'm taking y'all way back with them, right? And as I sit here, I remember my mother and my father had an argument. It spilled out into the street. And I remember him saying, I'm going to kill her. I'm going to effing kill her. And he gets a gun. My mother runs out. She has my sister, who at this point couldn't have been no more than not even a year old. And she's running down the street. And I remember him taking the gun, pointing it at her. The gun misfires. He does it again. He misses her twice. The last time I saw my mother that night, she's on the ground, and I'm thinking, oh my God, is she going to die? What's going to happen? And I'm standing here going, don't do this. Don't do this. So for me, that was just the beginning of the story with that trauma. And it went on for quite some time. That was the night that my mother decided, no, I can't have my children in the midst of this. I think when I think about that night, I think of, wow, the strength my mother had to say, you know what? I'm a parent. I have 2 girls, and I don't want them to see this life. But let me back up a little bit. In the midst of my parents getting divorced, I end up having to move with my aunt 2 hours away. When I moved with my aunt, it was her and her husband. What we did not know was at the time, my aunt herself was dealing with domestic violence. And in their house, it was so different because in my house, I was the jokester. And I knew if I kept everybody laughing and joking and having a good time and making them smile, we're safe for the night. It didn't work in her house. In that house, it was constant every day. You didn't know what you were walking into. So if that's the point where it literally felt like walking on eggshells, or in my world, landmines. Because as you walked in the house, who knows what would happen. One night that was particularly traumatizing for me in that house was they were having dinner. Normal thing. And I guess this particular night, the bills came in. And so he's fussing and going on about this light bill. And I'm saying, oh my God, it's me. I had the lights on because I'm very big. I can't see jack, so I need light.
Right. Yeah.
So in the midst of this, he's screaming and fussing about this light bill, and he's also talking about he's tired of supporting this other child. How dare she come and bring this other child in the house? Keep in mind they have 2 other children. And this night it gets to an all-time high. My cousin sweeps me in the room. We have done this drill before. So now dishes are throwing. She's screaming. The neighbors have gotten used to this because this is just like another day in their world. And all this is going on. He flips the table over. We end up running in the room. And at this point, I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. And I remember, keep in mind, this is way back in the 80s, y'all, when they used to say, police are your friends. You can call. So I got under the bed and I called the police. I'll never forget this. When I called, the operator sent out the dispatch out. And when I got there, first thing I heard the officer say was, is there a problem here, ma'am? And she goes, no, that's not a problem. What do you mean there's not a problem? There's a problem here.
Someone called the police. Yeah.
Exactly. Later to find out that he was a part of the actual force and the head of the domestic violence department.
Wow.
So for me, I had so many different emotions about what it means to be loved, what it is to deal with who to trust.
No kidding.
I thought police were trustworthy.
This is something that, as you're telling your story, like I'm just listening to this going, how on earth could somebody put this onto like a 6-year-old, for example? Like that, your brain is just developing at that point in time. There's so much happening, and that has to leave like a significant, if not permanent, impact on your brain at that stage in life. And so then you have this experience here. And how old were you when this was happening? This second experience
happened, I was exactly 9. Because when I came back to school, I had just turned 10.
Right. Now, did you have any kind of support in your life at this point in time?
My only support at this time was honestly my grandmother and my Jesus. And I do call him my Jesus because I personalize it. He's the one for me.
Right.
My grandmother, when I grew up younger, and my mother was going through this. My grandmother would say, you always pray. You always pray. You don't know how God's going to answer your prayer. Just pray. And when I got to the area with my aunt, I just knew there was no other way I can get out of it. I had called the police. Nothing was solved there. And then once this went on, that's all I knew was to pray. And literally from the night that it got so bad that she had gotten the black eye, and literally he beat her again for another hour after the police were removed, after the police left, he beat her again for another hour behind that. All of a sudden, now here I am going, wow, what do I do? How do I deal with this? And I remember praying. And literally after that prayer, I was out of that house within 2 weeks.
Okay. So where did you go from there?
I ended up coming back to my mother's house. My mom and my dad were now divorced. And now we're at the point where at this point, my dad is not going quietly. He is now saying, no, I'll burn it down with everybody in it before I let you go. And it got even more volatile. So at this point, I now have school authorities knowing all of what's going on, how to change this up, what needs to be done. And like literally, I'm having people say, this is who picked you up. This is how you leave school. And I'm just glad to say I had a community that took time to say, really, this is what's going on. And this is how we need to help this baby.
So at this point, you're starting to get some support around you, some people who are aware that you're in and have been through some pretty drastic and dramatic situations. Did that make it difficult as a child for you to socialize with your peers, to make friends or anything like that? Or what was that like?
So when you look at this and I look back now, I became the ultra funny girl. When it came to relationships, I became the one that had to make everybody laugh. I had to make everybody joke. That's just what I did. I didn't really know any other way because I knew if I could make you laugh, I knew that I was safe. When I got in middle school, I became the girl that was very funny, but if I was around a guy that I liked, I was real standoffish because I didn't know how he would behave. So I became that person that was quick to fight when it came to guys. So I had to learn later, this is how you need to handle this. This is not what you do. And it took me time. I had to be honest. It took me time as I got older and really started seeking out counseling services for myself and saying, listen, I've had some things in my past that have not been healthy for me, and I need to really work through those. And I really must say I've had some dynamic counselors, therapists who all came through in different ways and showed me you're okay. We all go through something.
Yeah. Was there a point in time in your experience where you realized like I need help in a professional capacity? And was it difficult for you to come to that place of saying I need some kind of professional help?
Well, I ran for a lot of years. This is what my tagline was. That's just me. I'm just being me. And when I would do that, I would find that I was isolating people out. I got to the point that I was not being healthy to myself. I would overeat. I'm an emotional eater. That's just who I am. And I got to the space that when I finally broke down and got the help, I called everybody I could think of. And I had to learn it's okay to step out of your comfort zone. Because in my community, the first thing that was said was, you don't need anybody but Jesus. And I was like, that's great. But I need somebody else to talk to right now. Because I know he hears me, but I need somebody else to give me some kind of feedback verbally of what's going on. And when I finally did step out, it was an interesting world for me. Because I got to the point, I was going to therapists. And I'll never forget the first young man that I went to. He was a dynamic guy. But as I'm telling my story, he's breaking down and he's crying. And I'm like, sir,
you're supposed to be the therapist helping me.
You know, so I'm like, this is not what we do. I would never take it from him. I think he's probably great if he continued in the field. I just know he was not the therapist for me. Then I ended up getting other therapists. And for me, that was a real trip and discovery of what I really wanted, who was able to help me, and how they were able to help me. I knew that when I actually stepped out and started finding somebody professional, I wanted someone who would help connect with my belief. That they would not be trying to say, well, you don't need God in this corner, or that's not that, or that's not practical. They understood what that was for me. And then also, they just allowed me to be me. I didn't have to be the perfect client. So they knew some weeks I was going to be great and homework would be turned in. Other weeks I'd be like, listen, ma'am, listen, sir, I didn't do the homework. I'm going to just be honest with you. I was in an emotional space. I ate. and I didn't want
Yep.
to deal with this. So I love that experience of really searching for the right therapist, searching for the right person. And I
Yeah.
think so many people, that's the part that kind of takes them away from looking for therapy. Because
Yeah.
the therapist is going to try to change us instead of just hearing us.
Yeah. And that's quite something as well. And so what age were you when you started going to get professional therapy or professional counseling?
When I got 20 years old and I actually could afford it, when I actually
Okay.
had my first major job, I took the purpose of going and saying, okay, what's the insurance plan? You got to talk to somebody. And the reason why I say this is because I became the person who people would say, you're so nice. And I'd be like, don't say that to me. And I would lash out because I didn't want you to see me as nice. I wanted to make sure you saw me as that's not the one to play with. And I had built up such a wall that other people were like, oh my God. Like I had guys scared of me because it was like, oh my God, like you're really intense. And I'm like, yeah, I should be. And not realizing that's not how you're gonna find your happily ever after. You can't
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they every guy, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in this process, I'm going, you're gonna have to fix this. Sis, you got problems. Sis, you need to admit that you got some things that are way deeper than what you're really being honest about. And once I realized that I kept getting the same behaviors and reactions from others that were not healthy to me, yeah, I needed to change some things. And I think for me, the biggest thing that one of my therapists gave me, I thought it was so neat. She said, pick a song that fits your life right now. And
Okay.
I'm so big into music, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I
I
gotta know
was
what the song was.
so I get to this point, and you would never guess the song that I picked. I picked Whitney Houston. How will I know?
Okay.
And such a poppy song, right? Like you
Yeah. Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
her dancing with her hair, and she's in these bright colors and she's doing her thing. That Whitney was getting down back in the day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I get here, and I didn't realize when I really started analyzing that song for me, this is a woman who's talking about heartbreak over a poppy beat. She wants to be in
Right.
love with this person, but she's scared to actually be a part of that love. We all have those moments when you fantasize, this is what my love is going to look like. This is what my health is going to look like. But you got to put in some work to get to it. And I think that's where we all are. I know that's where she was because I was right there with her.
Yeah. Yeah. You're.
Right there with her. Every chorus line, how will I know? And it was just something to see for me that once I really started digging in and having that therapist that said, you're not going deep enough for this. You're giving me shallow answers. I was like, wow. Like I think now, and I'm like, I think I'm kind of that therapist now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want the nice little how do you do's. I want the truth. I want you to tell me what it is. How do you feel? What's going on? And that particular therapist did it for me.
So, because here you are, you're coming into adulthood, you've been traumatized as a child, and you haven't really been equipped up to this point with the tools to even deal with that. So your brain is largely in this sort of like defensive state where you're probably looking around like, who's the threat? In a lot of like almost every human interaction you experience is colored with, is this person safe?
Yes, very much so. And for me, I have to be honest. I think there's a lot of people that may have been safe people for me, but I didn't see them as safe.
Right. Yeah.
And if you have glasses on that are colored with the wrong hue, you'll miss out on so much in your life and so many opportunities because you're like, they don't fit my level of safe.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing for me. I had to learn it was okay to step out of my box and say, let me try this. Let me see if this is really what's for me. And so I had to learn. This is big. Stepping out is not a bad thing. You just got to take it, embrace it, and do it.
Yeah. So now thinking about this and thinking about how maybe people would have interacted with you, for someone out there that might be listening and maybe someone in their life has gone through trauma or has been traumatized and they're aware of it or maybe even has shared a little bit about it. I think we're not very good on like a human level, friend to friend, or in our relationships with navigating when somebody expresses or shares a trauma they've been through, because maybe we feel like, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to do, or maybe it's my responsibility to fix this or help them somehow make the discomfort go away with what I've just been hearing. What might you share with someone who's first encountering another person they're close to sharing about a trauma, and what they might say or do or interact with that individual?
First thing I would do is just honestly be an ear. You realize that for a lot of people, they've never had that person to just listen, not to judge, not to say, oh, well, what did you do? How did you? Just listen. Just be in that moment and say, I understand. Once they've listened and they have finished what they're telling you, then you go a little deeper and say, how are you going to heal that? Because for so many times we want to fix it for the other person, and we got to make sure the other person truly wants to deal with it.
And I think and that's really, really powerful. What a question to ask. How are you going to heal that? And you might get an answer, I don't know right now, from the person that's coming back. Like, I really don't know what to do. And this is not to say that in our role, as friends or in relationships, that we necessarily want to play the role of trauma counselor, because I think that's a qualified profession. But on the same token, I think we're terrified of, like, maybe I want to put it this way. It's like, it's pretty hard to make someone's trauma worse by listening to them and hearing them.
You can't make it worse. Here's the thing. They've already experienced it. Yeah. So you can't make it worse. But what you can do as a friend, be a beacon of light and say, okay, you're going to go talk to, I'm just going to use a name, James Brown as therapist number 1. Let's come back and let's talk about that experience. How did you feel going into that office? Did this counselor feel like somebody you can be open and honest with? And I believe in taking what I call like a rating sheet, kind of at the end of that session. Hey, did this counselor fit for me? Could I be open and honest? Did I find myself hiding some stuff? Did they go along with my beliefs? Whether that's, whether I have a alternative lifestyle or not. Did they understand where I was coming from? Could they understand my culture? Did I feel like I had to do more explaining to them than them actually hearing me? So you might even have one of those little moments and say, you know what, let's grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. I'm a tea girl myself. And let's talk about it a little bit. Let's kind of talk about how this experience felt for you. Did this feel like something you want to continue with this person? If not, reach out to someone else. Remember, every therapist is not for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. They're still human beings.
I do. I literally call it therapy shopping. Because I know for me, I had to hop around and find the therapist that was best for me. The therapist that was going to be okay with me coming in some days looking crazy with my hair sticking on top of my head. The therapist some days I'm going to come in crazy, some days I'm going to come in cussing. I had to find that person who said, however she walks in this door today, I'm going to be okay with her.
Right. Now, here's another thing that you may have encountered. And, I appreciate already that you've been willing to be open and vulnerable and share some of what you've shared. From my understanding, you can clarify, but it seems like the trauma that you experienced was not necessarily directed like explicitly at you, but it was witnessing other people. Were you yourself ever a victim of the violent trauma, or was it you were caught in these situations where you're feeling powerless and helpless and witnessing this?
For me, I was caught in the situations where I felt helpless. And that was a part of that. Here's the part most people don't realize. Your traumas can hit you in different ways. You don't have to be the person getting hit to experience it. If you're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, guess what? You're part of that trauma because you've witnessed it. And there are so many children and adults who've witnessed things, but didn't know, could I classify that as trauma? Could I not? That's
right.
The big thing.
And this is why I asked that question, because it's really important. So like, because my story, because we've chatted before, and I went through the physical trauma of being attacked and nearly beaten to death. My wife went through the trauma of seeing the aftermath. So she herself was not attacked, but she witnessed the aftermath of me covered in blood and beaten and bruised and all of this, having gone through that experience. And there's a temptation for people on the outside to say, well, it's not so bad because you weren't the one that was attacked.
But here's the thing. I don't have to physically be touched to have the same emotional
Yeah.
scars as the person who was touched.
Yes.
And for me, here's what I discovered. My mother, all of her physical wounds healed. It was
Yeah.
easy for her to know how to cover that up or put on makeup or do whatever. But the emotional piece is the part that took her decades to get
Yeah.
out of it. For her to be
Yeah.
open and be able to stand in front of a group of women and actually talk about that experience and say, this is what I experienced. This is how it started. Because, for a lot of people, people always assume physical abuse starts off with the slap first. It doesn't. It starts off with literally little comments. It starts off with little shoves. It starts off with the skirt that I thought was cute with you before. Now it's too short. And
Mhm.
there's different levels to everything. And so many people need to look at what happens before we get to what I call the finale of abuse.
Yes. Yeah.
People look at it as the grand thing and, well, this happened on this date. What happened in those pieces before? You want to know that. So
I love that.
I love how you talked about with your wife. She watched the aftermath. So many of us don't think about the aftermath.
Mhm.
We think, well, she didn't physically experience it, but she loved somebody who did.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to highlight that. I really appreciate what you shared. I think it's so helpful because there are those who don't understand who wanted to talk to us afterwards. And it was almost like they were treating trauma like a contest, like,
Wow.
yeah, because sometimes the other thing that comes out in this is when people hear your story, they want to say, oh, that's nothing. You should hear, ah.
Uh-huh. They want to one up.
Mm-hmm. Was
Trauma
that,
is a one up game.
yeah. Did you experience that when you tried to share some of the things that you went through?
I've had it in certain places, but I always kind of talk about it and say, but let's put this in the eyes of a child. It sounds crazy for me to say it to you now as an adult, right? Who's fully healed, happy, and moving forward. But put that in the eyes of a child who has to interact with other children every day.
Yeah.
Who has to be able to navigate and not just interact with children, but learn on top of it. Because keep in mind, if I don't feel safe, there's no way I'm going to learn. Or
absolutely.
That's to my ability.
How do you learn? Because learning happens, a lot of it, like that sort of the prefrontal cortex or that school educational type learning is happening in this part of your brain, but this part of your brain, the primal part that just wants to keep you safe, is dominant. And it's really, you're learning you learned how to be funny. You learned how to diffuse situations. You learned how to read people at a level that, like, we really, like, a child shouldn't have to have that as their experience. Unfortunately, it was your experience. But the things that you were learning, like, yeah, your brain was not in the place to be learning, the specifics of, say, algebra or something like that, when your brain's literally like, I have to try to keep you safe, and I don't know if I'm going to be safe going home today.
And that's the big thing people don't realize. For so many kids, that's their everyday life.
Yeah.
So you wonder why Johnny can't quite get the concept. He has a lot of things on his plate. He's trying to one, am I going to eat when I get home? Am I going to be safe when I get home? Am I going to be called up in some foolishness on the way to getting home? So, we have to look at the whole picture and be honest with ourselves. Like I say, I am very grateful for now understanding that I lived through this.
Yes.
Because when I speak to other people, some of them were not as lucky, or their sibling was not as lucky.
Yeah.
So,
and you talk about, if I have this right, trauma and their cousins.
Trauma and their cousins, yes.
Okay, because so I love sort of this element. Like, you have taken, what I love about your story is how you have taken, like, a lot of suffering and trauma that you went through as a child in those developmental years, and you've got to this place of healing, and people will see that now. But I think it's why it's important that we share this element of your story. So now that you are taking what you have been through and using that as a platform to help others, maybe not go through, or maybe not struggle as much as you did, by giving them a little bit of hope. And so
I'm going to do a shameless plug real quick.
You do your shameless plug. So for those listening who can't hear, Patrice here is showing the book Trauma and Their Cousins. And it's a book that you've written that also has a workbook that accompanies it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it has a workbook to actually help you in the process of finding the proper type of resource for you. It talks about what is it that you're looking for? What are you walking in to heal, and what do you want to do? And it goes into detail about what are the different types of trauma from childhood and some of those effects. So those effects I call cousins. Remember, when you talk about an effect of something, it doesn't travel by itself. So for
Right.
me, one of my effects was I'm an emotional eater. I eat.
Mm.
That's how I deal with life. If it's painful, I stuff it with food. And because certain cookie brands are not volunteering to give me some free food or money, I'm not going to call their name. Along with that, I
Yeah,
learned to be that person that became the life. And when you know that that's your thing, you overcompensate in certain areas. You'll
absolutely. Yeah.
notice that for some people, it could be as easy as I got to make sure I win everything, or everything has to be a competition. But for other people, it could be, you know what? Now I'm drinking a little bit much. Maybe before I was having a sip or two, but now I'm hitting a whole bottle every night. For somebody
Right.
else, it's experimenting in some type of drug of choice, gambling. It could be anything. But these are those cousins we don't think about. And some of those cousins are so quiet that we don't even realize they're there until the much louder cousin shows up.
Yeah, I think it's really. I love that you framed it in that way, because it's like it's not a direct like linear connection, and so we don't often connect the dots like that. We don't look at this behavior as actually being connected to something deeper or something bigger until for me, it was, I didn't set out to become a binge eating food addict. It
Wow.
didn't start like that, but this is what it blossomed into. If you were to see me at like a social gathering, I was the life of the party, encouraging everybody to eat. I was actually using that to mask my own disordered eating behaviors, and maybe not even fully realizing that's what I was doing. But by encouraging everybody to overindulge and to eat and so on,
Mhm.
that was meaning I was not the only one who was doing this.
But that also goes with culture. You have to
Yeah.
remember, I'll speak for me. Being a Southern
Yeah.
African American, that's a part of saying I love you. Like my
Right.
grandmother, that's what she did. Like she's the person that would cook for the homeless and take them food. And the first thing she's saying is, eat, 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 eat. I'm giving you food. I'm giving you love on the plate. That's her statement. I'm giving you love on the plate. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
great. But you see the correlation?
Yeah.
Love to her was the food.
Yeah.
And before you knew it, guess what? Love to me was the food.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so many times we don't see it.
I want more love in my life, so I eat more.
Yep. There it goes.
And like perhaps your grandmother had a couple of key or signature dishes that were her specialty, that if you eat that, like it brings back a memory of like her cooking.
My favorite thing, and I love to bake it I've cut down because I used to do it every other night when I was binge eating. But she has
Yeah.
an apple socket tummy cake. Like
Okay.
that, yeah, that's the recipe. You have to know it. You can't write it down, you can't share it. But that's that one recipe that every time I think of it and I actually have a piece of it, I hear her. I feel her joy in the food, the love in the food.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my favorite one. I can't share the rest.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. So, if you were to sort of say in a nutshell, to like because obviously we can't really capture all of it in this short window of time of our conversation here, but how you went from like being traumatized to now being this person, you're not only free from your trauma, but you're able to give back. Is there sort of is there sort of like a condensed sort of step by step, I don't want to say path, because everyone's path is going to look different, but at least some principles that people can sort of progress through to get from being traumatized and struggling to a place where you're free from that?
For me, the biggest step is admitting. Just like they talk about in 12 steps, it's
Yeah.
really honestly admitting to yourself, sis, something's going on. Bruh, come on now. This is not you. And I know you. That's not you. First, being honest to admit to yourself, and then two, seeking. When you seek your higher power of your understanding,
Hmm.
but then also seek professional help.
Yeah.
I think for so many of us, we just have this philosophy, and I grew up with this philosophy. All I need is my Jesus. That was great. But I had questions that people couldn't answer. I had conversations that people were not ready to face because, again, when I went to the service, I was the lady whose daughter was the loud mouth, but the lady was real quiet. So she never spoke about this. And we don't talk about these things in public.
Yeah.
And then once you start to seek, be honest with yourself and walk it out. Because in that room with whatever therapist or counselor you connect with, it's your healing that's on the line. It's not theirs. So you can
Yeah.
come in there and snowball them all day if you choose. But at the end of the day, who's going to still leave emotionally bleeding and hurt?
Yeah.
So,
And I think, sorry, I was going to say, I just wanted to zero in on that because I think we hide from doing the work because of this primal fear of the pain we're going to experience by working through it.
So here's how my voyage went. We're working through that primal pain. At first, I was like, I like my therapist. She does an amazing job. Then after a while, I was like, I don't really like her no more. I'm like, I don't want to talk to her no more. But here's the thing that I had to understand. When you get into therapy and it gets tough, that's when the healing is really happening. Many times we look at it and we're like, oh, all of this has been done. No, darling, this is just like when you go to the dentist and you get a cavity and they got to go in and drill out and clean out and clear out and get rid of all that yuck. Same thing that therapist has to do. They have to get rid of all those years and decades of yuck and help you get restructured to the woman and the man that you know you were supposed to be. But you got to allow them to get in there and dig it out first. That's the big key. I mean, I know for me, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, I remember some of the homework assignments, and I'm very big on that. I call them self-investments.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
With the self-investment, that taught me I'm just as important. So I need to invest in myself. And I can't expect the therapist to do it all on their own. I got to put in some work here. I got to put in some leg work. I got to lift with the legs and make this happen. I want to be better, so I got to put in some work.
I love that. And like I say to my clients, I'm a tour guide, not a Sherpa.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think for so many of us, we just assume it's going to happen. You got to put in some work in it. And here's the best thing about that I say for me. The best reward that I got out of the hard work for myself was seeing that I was better than that. I didn't have to have those walls down. And then even better, I didn't have to have those walls built up, but I had somebody who took the time to help take each brick down with me and say, how do you feel about this brick? Is this brick still troubling you? You want to talk about this? I had somebody who was willing to say, I'll walk through that path with you. Yeah, I know that's where we had our moment, but I'm going to still be here to work with you. That's the part. You don't have to try to heal alone. I know we're in such a day and age of, I'm doing it all by myself. I'm doing me. But in the midst of that, you're doing you, but you're doing you alone. You were not built to be alone. So the goal is to come and have someone, what I call your partner, in your healing to help you get to where you're trying to go.
Yeah. So important. The idea of a self-made individual is a myth. We all, there's that famous expression that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, but I'm like, we are here today living the life we're living because of those who went before us. So if we can, it's the ego that tells us that you need to do this by yourself. No, you don't. It does not diminish you to get help. If anything, it's like, it's the best possible thing you can do because it frees you. And so how did you, in the midst of your therapy, in the midst of like some of the deepest, darkest, most difficult moments, you're processing this heavy stuff. How do you keep going in that moment?
I had a lot of bathtub cries. Let me just keep it very real. I had a lot of bathtub cries. A lot of days at a particular ice cream company. I will not announce the name because they're not paying me. We had some days with some pints. And we had a lot of bathtub cries. But I realized that once I got out that tub and I cried my last tear, I was a lot stronger when I got up. I went in the blubbering mess now. I'm the first to say I went in and I was snot bubbling and white.
Yeah.
But when I got out that tub, I said, sis, that's the last time you're going to cry about that again. Get on up. Let's make this work.
You metabolized. It's like you brought it. Like, what's fascinating about tears is you could analyze the tears and you can analyze the hormones in it, and you can know like what somebody is experiencing with that tear, whether it's joy or sadness or pain.
Wow. Oh, that's
it is. So you think about how we approach crying, especially particularly as males, but even for women too. Maybe it's like we look at crying like a bad thing, and it's like the best possible emotional release we can experience. It's literally physically taking some of that pain out of our body through our tears. And I don't think people had ever really thought about it like that. And so But I wanted to lean in just a little bit more here. So I love that part of it. But you're going through this pain, and this is what stops a lot of people, I think, from getting the help. Is like, this is going to be so uncomfortable. I don't think I have the strength to do it. Were there some moments when you're crying where you wondered, is this ever going to stop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. When it got to the point where it was really digging into those teen years,
Yeah.
because at this point I have a lot of friends who, they have their dads, and I remember this very clearly. In the earlier teen years, we're talking around the lockers and everybody's kind of sharing about, their parents. And of course, you know how high school students, I can't stand my
Yeah.
parents, they don't understand me, and this kind of thing. And I remember a girlfriend of mine talking about her parents and how they were so overbearing on her and how they were always there. And I'm going, you mad because they're there? And I want one to be there. I want them to be here in this moment. I want to understand. I want them to see it. But yet, getting through that moment and understanding, I'm okay. And I'm going to be supported. It didn't look the way like I wanted it to be supported, but I still ended up being supported.
And at what moment in time did you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel where, there's still more work to do, but I can see like my work is paying off? How far along were you?
How far along was I? It was about 6 months. But this
Yeah.
was with me being very serious and getting in and really seeing for myself. What was my light when I stopped going and literally being in whatever grocery store twice and 3 times a week? That's when I realized something had changed, because all of a sudden now I wasn't stuffing anymore. It
Yeah.
was really coming out, and I didn't find myself after sessions going, you know what? Is there a Publix over here? Like, I didn't find myself doing
Yeah.
that and running to the local grocery store to go and stuff down
Yeah.
what had just happened. Or I didn't find myself in that space where I was like, oh, this is going to be a bathtub day, isn't it? The bathtub cries slowed up. I wasn't stuffing myself anymore. That's when I knew light was better. And even in the best thing I would say with COVID now is you don't have to drive out of your home to do that. You can talk to a therapist online and have these conversations and feel comfortable in your home, getting it off your chest and leaving it. I think that's the biggest piece for me. I had to learn to leave it. It's kind of like you saying, okay, you know what? I've gotten past this. I'm moving on. I don't have to take it with me.
Now, that leads to another question. Is there a temptation to want to hold on to some of this past pain because it's like there's a part of your identity, and maybe there's a part of your identity that you might be afraid of losing if you let this go?
So the temptation is, this served me. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you, when I say this served me. The temptation is, it served me, so it made me harder. It made me stronger. I knew I could be that girl. But when you realize no love is in that. Love is supposed to be served, not defense mechanism. You're supposed to be serving love to people, not defense mechanisms every day. That's the best way I can put it. And when I realized that I wasn't serving people truly the honest me, and the love that I had to share with others, I realized, nah, you can't keep going like this. And that was the biggest piece for me.
Because, we can use the pain and suffering and, now this I don't mean to use this expression in a trite fashion, but say something like a drama queen. We've heard that expression before, where somebody uses the dramas in their life, the pain in their life, as a way of garnering sympathy from other people. But you're in that sense, you're kind of trapped in this victim mindset. But there is an appeal to that, to staying trapped in that victim mindset, because you can use that pain and suffering that you're going through as a way to get people to give you sympathy in the intention that you desire. Did you find yourself grappling with that?
That piece, no. And I'm going to tell you why. Because once I had my circle who was really in front of me going, okay, well, you're doing the steps, you're doing all this. They didn't want to hear that same old song. And that's what I had to learn. Even I got to the point where I was sick of hearing the same old song about me and what happened. I was like, no. You get to the point you don't want to play that same old record again. You realize there's a new song I need to sing now. And that's a song of victory. That's a song of I've made it out. This is a song of joy now. You don't want to be back here still dragging and sad about what happened yesterday. You want to start creating what's happening now, what's going on with you now. And so for me, That's why I went into the field for therapy. I love that. That's the piece that I love about my job now. I get to help people create that new them. They get
Yeah.
to sing a new song. They're not who they used to be. They're not the trauma that they were before. They're now moving into being healthy, happy, and whole and healed people.
And I think this is so important for people to understand that it is possible to be healed. It is
Oh, yeah.
possible to be whole. It is possible to put these things behind you. Now, it's hard. It is not easy. It is uncomfortable. It
Mhm.
is painful. It is difficult, but it's worth it.
Oh, it's definitely worth it. This is one of those moments where you get to see and say to yourself, honey, I'm worth it. No matter what somebody said in the past, no matter how it looked, no matter how it was shaped, I'm worth it. And here's the most beautiful thing. You can look yourself in the mirror and say, man, you've come a long way. And I love just who you are. Because while you're going through that and you're still living that old story, that old trauma, you're not getting to discover the newness of who you are now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm loving this conversation. I have two more questions for you before we wrap up. One of them is, what was your anchor in like the deepest, darkest moments as you're working through this? What was the hope that you were looking forward to as that helped you to keep going when it felt like you didn't know if this was going to end or you couldn't keep doing this?
My anchor was my God, my
Mm-hmm.
prayer time. Like it got to the point that was my thing. And it started off very small. It literally started off with 5 minutes. Okay, God, what we doing here now? You said we doing this, what we doing? And I don't do the old holier than thou prayers. I literally be like, listen, God, so we going, right? I don't really want to talk to this therapist today. So what's up? What's the plan? So it was a lot of that. And it was me being
Yeah.
honest with myself in the midst of me understanding that it got to get better than where I am now. It has to get better than where I am now. Because at that point, I honestly could say I was dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you get sick of being dysfunctional, when you get sick of yourself, you'll do something.
Yeah. When the pain is staying the same outweighs the pain of change and transformation is when we start to move forward. So now with the perspective that you have, everything you've experienced, who you've become, the therapist that you are you able to look back at like your uncle and your father and what they did and how they behaved? Are you able to look back on that with compassion and with an understanding of maybe why that behavior was occurring, even if the behavior itself was very hurtful, harmful, and destructive?
It's interesting you say that because this conversation came up not too long ago. I later discovered in my life that my father's mother was the abuser in their home. And it's amazing when you don't know, and this is why I tell people it's so important to have these family conversations so you know how to help your children walk through it. Instead of being so quick to hide it in the closet, talk about it so you know what that is, what it looks like. Um, I I have compassion for that little boy who couldn't be honest with his household. I have compassion for those young boys that, for both of them, had seen trauma in their own homes and never took the time to get the help that they needed. Because at that point, being a male in their eyes was, taking care of business and never worrying about my mental health. So yes, I have compassion for them in that. Do I respect what they did? Not even close. But I have compassion for them. And I wished at some point both of them would have sought the help because I really believe it would have helped the generations after them.
Yeah, and it's compassion. I say to people is not a get out of jail free card. In other words, it is not excusing the behavior that has occurred, but it's seeking to understand that behavior, and in understanding the behavior, then being able to perhaps let go of what might have happened. And for me, I said I forgave the man who tried to kill me.
Wow.
I did that not because I was excusing what they had done, but I said, what got them to the place where this is how they were behaving? What happened to them to get them to that place? And I think that was one of the ways that I was able to start moving past my own trauma.
I love how you shared that because so many times when we think about getting past our own trauma, we don't think about what happened to that person before us. We always just kind of focus on us. And like I said, for me, it was the conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, me and my mom, that really opened my eyes to having compassion for both of them, actually. Because for me, I just kept, in my mind, they were the worst of the worst until we start having these conversations about this is what they experienced. This is why they were this way. So,
man, there's like another segment that we could like dive into, but I think we're gonna have to save this for another conversation, because you've shared some really powerful things here. I love your insights. I love your openness, your vulnerability, your willingness to share, and the fact that you're now again taking this and you're empowering other people. So if people want to connect with you, how do they reach you? Where do they connect with you?
So they can connect with me on Facebook and on IG at Patricebrantleynow. The website is up. It will be up and fully running by tomorrow. You can connect with me at the Seed Sowing Sister Movement. That will be up. It will have actually the workbook and the book and the audio book as well, so that you can grab your copy there. And always connect with me so we can talk. Let's continue this conversation offline so that we can talk about how we can heal and be better people, healthy and happy people, so that we don't have to keep walking to these moments of having trauma. Trauma should be something we can leave if we talk about it.
Yeah. And there's no shame in having been traumatized. Nobody asks for it. Nobody chooses it. And so, let's take this conversation home. If you could leave people with one piece of wisdom, one actionable advice, just something that somebody could take as a seed thought and start with to help them move forward, what would you share?
It's never too late to be healed. And trauma happens to everyone. I don't care who you are, what color, what race, what size. It happens to everyone, but everyone can be healed when they step into the process.
I love that. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to when we get to chat with you again next.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to coming on back and talking with y'all a little bit more.
You betcha. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become, and I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.